Having survived the toddler years, remember the toddler years? Maybe you are going through the toddler years. My wife Lisa and I survived toddler years 3 times with children affectionately called Abby Joy, Jonathan Curtis, and Lori Beth. But having survived those years, now I think back upon how these 3 children of ours were actually operating at the time. I call them toddler property laws. Number 1, if I like it, it's mine. Number 2, if I had it a minute ago, it's mine. Number 3, if I can take it from you, it's mine. Number 4, it must never appear to be yours in any way whatsoever, because it is always and eternally mine. And then there's that great theologian, Daffy Duck, who in one cartoon is run around and he uses the word mine 7 times. Mine, 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 mine. It's all mine. This morning I invite you to be honest, to recognize that there is in each of us an insatiable desire to look at our neighbor's lawnmower and snowblower, our neighbor's porch and patio, our neighbor's bike and boat, indeed, whatever belongs to our neighbors, and long for all of that cool stuff to be mine. We're in this sermon series in Lent, right? In the book of Exodus. Let my people go. And Pharaoh finally lets the people of God go. They go through the Red Sea in chapter 14 of the book, and there's mighty Moses leading Israel. But today we come to chapter 20 in the book of Exodus, chapter 21 through 17, arguably the most famous part of the book. Everyone knows something about the 10 Commandments. So after Pharaoh lets the people go, God brings them through the Red Sea and brings them to Mount Sinai for the 10 Commandments. Here they are. You probably know them. I invite you to look at them again, asking this question. What 2 commandments up there are the most similar? That's your assignment today. I know it's Daylight Saving Sunday, and we're just trying to stay awake, but you have an assignment right now. Which 2 commandments up there are the most similar, are the most alike? Answer, 9 and 10. Hanging curveball, you might say, slow pitch softball. It's a no-brainer because 9 and 10 both begin with the command, you shall not covet. Now, God repeats what is important. The most important of the 10 would be commandments 9 and 10. Why is that? Because every other sin addressed in the 10 commandments in 1 through 8, all those sins begin with what? Coveting. What's coveting? I want it all to be mine. At the heart of every sin is a problem in our heart. Now, don't get me wrong. It's okay to want stuff, desire stuff. Nothing wrong with that at all. Underscore, nothing wrong with wanting stuff. That's good, that's godly, that's grand, that's great. That's not coveting, though. Coveting isn't wanting stuff. Coveting is being willing to break any of the first 8 to get what I want. I will do whatever it takes, break any commandment, any ordinance, any statute, any precept, just to get what I want. Woody Allen famously puts it this way: the heart wants what it wants. Translated, I will do anything against these first 8 commandments. Steal, commit adultery, kill people with my words, murder people, have other gods, my job, my paycheck, my investments. I will do whatever it takes to make it all mine. So what do we do with this? I mean, really? What do I do with this titanic desire to acquire that's in my heart and in your heart too? How do we become more obedient and faithful to these 10 commandments? How do we break the stranglehold that coveting has in our lives? St. Paul, in our second reading, has the answer. Philippians chapter 4, verse 12. Paul says, I've learned the secret of being content. Now, being content is something we need to learn. Coveting, you don't need to learn that. You don't have to go to college and take Coveting 101. Coveting comes natural. This is a part of being a sinful, broken, rebellious people. We all have this titanic desire to acquire everything. No, you don't need to learn how to covet, neither do I. But we do need to learn how to be content. If I learn to be content, then when coveting knocks on the door, I can slam the door. If I learn how to be content, I can conquer coveting. Paul says, I've learned this secret. You see, it's a secret because most people don't get it. Most people live their entire lives so unhappy. If you want to know the most unhappy people on the planet, they are consumed with coveting. But Paul says there's a secret out there, a secret of being content. He says in every situation, whether you're old or young or well-fed or hungry, living in plenty or want, being content conquers coveting. If we don't conquer coveting, coveting will conquer us. It will drive a stake straight in our heart. And we may be breathing, but inside, we're dead. So how do I learn to be content? So I push back hard on coveting. Well, the first step is this. Realize the sequence. Realize the sequence. The sequence of where coveting takes us. Because most people, and myself included, well, what's the big deal anyway, right? So I've got this sinful desire for my neighbor's wife or husband or for that neat new car. So I want to do anything to get that. What's the big deal? It's just in my heart. Don't rationalize the sequence. Rationalize means rational lies. Don't rationalize this. It's deadly stuff. Realize the sequence. The sequence begins in Genesis 3:8. You know this story. Eve is the woman. She saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye. She coveted. This is the first time in the Bible the word coveted is used. And she coveted for gaining wisdom. Then she took and ate it. So here's the sequence. See, covet, take. Got it? Well, a lot of times, well, I'm just looking. Oh, beware, just looking, because looking can lead to coveting, and coveting can lead to taking. Just ask a man named Achan. A-C-H-A-N. Achan is speaking here in Joshua 7:21. He's speaking to Joshua. I saw, this man Achan says, among the spoils a beautiful mantle from Shinar, 200 shekels of silver. That will set you up financially for life, plus a what? A bar of gold weighing 50 shekels. That'll get you a new house in South Florida. Then I coveted them, and then I took them. You see the sequence. See, covet, take. This sequence appears 5 more times in the Old Testament. See, covet, take. Well, where does taking lead me in this sequence? For that we need James 1:15. After desire, now we're talking here sinful desire, coveting. Once I see something, I have this sinful desire. It's conceived, it gives birth to sin. See, so I steal, I take your reputation, I make stuff up, I sin, and when sin is fully grown, it gives birth to death. Coveting, if not checked, will lead to death. You know that. The world of coveting is a dark world because it leads to death. When I covet my neighbor's trophy spouse, it leads to the death of my marriage. When I covet my neighbor's Indianapolis Colts season tickets, Mercedes-Benz, pick your poison. It brings the death of inner peace. When I covet your personality, your looks, your connections, your money, it brings death to my happiness. Coveting is a dark world. That's why God addresses it not once in the 10 Commandments, twice. I got a good lesson on coveting when I was in 4th grade. My parents for Christmas gave me a bike. Check that. They gave me a Stingray bike. Remember those? With flared handlebars, those little ribbons coming out, chrome on the side. And you know, if you had a Stingray, you had a what kind of seat? A banana seat. Oh, wow. Remember that song by Steppenwolf, Get Your Motor Running? Heading on a highway, looking for adventure. 4th grade, Reed Lessing, Brighton, Colorado. I was born to be wild. Until I went to Greg Heaston's house. Greg Heaston's dad, important point here. Greg Heaston's dad was a dentist. Greg Heaston's parents could afford a nicer bike. Greg Heaston for Christmas got a bright red Schwinn 10-speed bike. When I saw Greg's new Schwinn bright red 10-speed bike, that motor of mine, that motor died. Because I had entered this dark world of coveting. Don't rationalize this sequence, folks. Don't do it. It'll get you every time. No. See, covet, take, death. You don't believe me? Just ask Eve. Genesis 3. You don't believe me? Just ask Achan. In Joshua 7. Don't believe me? Look at James 1:15. When desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's fully grown, oh my, it gives birth to death. Philippians 4:12, I've learned the secret of being content. Because being content helps me push back against coveting. It conquers coveting instead of letting coveting conquer me. So that's the first point. You want to avoid this dark world of death? Realize, don't rationalize the sequence. Second, We're learning. It's a process. We're learning how to be content. Personalize your salvation. Don't generalize it. No, personalize. Make it yours. Before God gives the 10 Commandments, in Exodus chapter 20, verses 3 through 17, this is what he says in verse 2. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Not his God, or her God, or their God, or any God, or some God. No, this God is your God. Personalize your salvation. Also, within the 10 Commandments chapter, right? In 20 verse 5. Again, I, the Lord, your God, am a zealous God. What's a zealous God? God has a titanic desire to acquire. He really does. What does he want to acquire? What does he want to possess? What does he want to get his hands on? You. In fact, God is so zealous, he will do whatever it takes to save and rescue and deliver you. Whatever it takes, oh, you bet your bottom dollar. That's why we have all these cool plagues in the book of Exodus, right? God at work, rescuing his people Israel. First there's water turned to blood. Then there are frogs. Frogs in your bed. Frogs in your head. Frogs with cousin Ed. Then there are gnats and lice. Flies all over the place. Number 5, your animals get sick. Boils. Hail, number 7. You think weather in Fort Wayne is bad. And then there are locusts. Locusts. Hebrew has 14 different words for locusts. Is that amazing? Let me just share 13 of them with you right now. No, if I do, you will plague me, I'm sure. So let's move on. The 9th plague, darkness. And then the 10th, the most climactic plague of this zealous God to get his people out of Egypt would be the death of the firstborn in the land. You know that story. There's going to be a lamb that is butchered and slain. Israel is to take that blood of the lamb, put it on the doorpost of their house, so that angel of death passes over their house. It passes through the Egyptian houses and kills their firstborn sons. This zealous God, who marshals all the power of the universe to have you and me, he came again, didn't he? He came again to save. But this time there are no fleas and flies and frogs. Sorry about that. But there is a Passover lamb. Check that. There is the Passover lamb. And his blood is not splattered on the doorframe of a house. No, his blood is splattered on a Roman instrument of execution, and it's mixed with spit and sweat and soldiers' cheap wine. The whole bloody mess is because God is a zealous God. And he will do anything. Yes, sacrifice his own son for us. It all ended. Crucified, dead, and buried. Joseph of Arimathea took him down from the cross, put him in a tomb, smell the odor of death. Look at the entire hopeless situation. See the confines. Watch as the stone is rolled in place of the tomb. But then witness the charred marks of a divine explosion to life. There is nothing dead about Jesus. He blew the rock open from the inside. He rolled away the stone. He's conquered death and the grave. He is still a zealous God, and he's speaking to us right now. Straight from his heart. The living Jesus says, I, the Lord your God, have brought you out of Egypt, that is to say, the land of sin and death and darkness, out of the house of slaves. I am the Lord your God, a zealous God, with an outstretched arm rescuing you as my arms hung limp on the wood of the cross. Don't generalize this. Personalize it. Personalize this salvation for you. He is the Lord my God, my Passover Lamb, who bled and died and rose for me. Third, you want to conquer coveting before coveting conquers you? You want to learn how to be content? Realize the sequence. Don't mess around with coveting. It's like a nuclear bomb. Personalize your salvation. Finally, internalize segula. Internalize. Get it deep in your DNA, down in your bones, into your heart of hearts. Internalize segula. Well, what's segula? Before God gives the Ten Commandments, he reminds Israel of who they are. Back in chapter 19, verse 5, God says, out of all the nations, you, Israel, will be my treasured possession. Behind that is this awesome Hebrew word, segula. Used only 8 times in the Old Testament. It's God's choice word to tell us who we are. Oh, I know what you feel like most of the time. You feel like you're rank and file. You feel like life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. You just feel kind of empty and useless and just going with the flow. But you're segula. You're God's prized, priceless possession. God wants you and me, warts and all. Such is not always the case. A few years ago, right here at St. Michael, I was doing a wedding, and as we usually do, the pastor and the groom were over there, sanctuary right. Just before we walked down, he leaned over and softly said, "You weren't my first choice." Oh, really? Yeah, the pastor I wanted couldn't make it. Oh, but thanks for doing it anyway. Anytime. I signed his wedding certificate, your replacement reverend. Oh, it felt so good. You ever felt like your second choice? Third choice? Now when it comes to this zealous God, oh no, you are his number one choice. When you were baptized, God said, "You're mine. You're my prized, priceless possession." God didn't have to. He wasn't forced into this. There was no compulsion. There was no mandate. He just says, "This is who you are." What beats that? Segula. Temptation, though, is to trivialize this, right? Trivialize means you make light of it. What's the big deal? Segula, it's Hebrew 8 times. Who gives a rep? Don't do that. Internalize. Segula. You are God's first pick always. Nothing beats that. So here we are, back where we started. Commandments 9 and 10. The heart of the Ten Commandments is the problem in our heart. Don't covet your neighbor's house, anything that belongs to your neighbor. We're pushing back against that, though, today, aren't we? We are learning with St. Paul to be content. How? You know. Realize the sequence, personalize salvation, internalize segula. But where, you're saying, where do I get the want to do this? Where do I get the power and the strength? You get it from the heart of God. What a verse. Isaiah 43 verse 1. God says, I've redeemed you. See, God has his own version of mine. I've redeemed you. I've called you by name. You are passionately, zealously, lovingly, eternally, God says, you're all mine. And with that, we have the want to and the strength and the power to sing our next hymn with great conviction and joy, and let's stand to do it.